Okay, hello. So this is part A of my Tara series, and today we're going to go through matching arguments. And in the previous video, we went through detecting reasoning errors. So if you haven't seen already, I would highly recommend you to do so. But that being said, let's get into it. So with matching arguments, I will say that these questions can look really intimidating because the arguments are on completely different topics, and that's exactly the point. You don't really care so much about the topic, but you care more so about the structure of the reasoning. So, in terms of how to actually approach these questions, you essentially break down the argument into its simplest form. This is true, therefore this is true. And look for an option that similarly mimics the same logical move. So don't look for similar words or similar situations, rather look for the same sort of relationship between evidence and conclusion. So if we read my example, all students who complete the revision course pass the test. Maya completed the revision course. Therefore, Maya will pass the test. So which of the following uses the most similar structure? A. All birds have wings. Robins are birds. Therefore, robins have wings. B. Some students revise at home. Tom revises at home. Therefore, Tom is a student. C. Students who sleep well tend to perform better. Tom slept well, so he will definitely get the highest mark. D. Maya passed the test because she revised. Or E. Maya completed the course before because she passed the test. So if you haven't been able to tell already, the answer is A. So if we look at the passage, we can see that the original structure is essentially saying that all A are B. So A is like the students and B is passing the test. And X is A, so Maya is a student. Therefore, X is B, so therefore Maya will pass the test. So we can go and mimic this with A. So as you can see, all birds have wings. Robins are birds, therefore robins have wings. So essentially, all A are B, X is A, therefore X is B. So if you can tell already, it literally has the same sort of structure. So if we look for the other options, we can see that it cannot be B because it reverses the reasoning. So knowing that someone revises at home does not establish that they're a student. And with C, it uses some reasoning and it makes a much stronger conclusion because it says that he'll definitely get the highest mark, which is extrapolating and is not really relevant. And with D, it's a casual explanation. It doesn't mimic any logical structure. And with E, it just states facts and does not reproduce the original reasoning. So for this question, therefore, just make sure you're looking at the same logical structure and ignore the argument as well. And okay, so this is an actual example. It's a very long example. The options do look really taunting, but you have to work through it. And again, this is from the 2008 paper, and it's question 46. So one of the latest ones. Um, if you intend to have a fire, you need dry kindling wood and a firelighter. Unfortunately, the kindling wood has been left out in the rain. So even though you have a firelighter, you will not be able to light the fire. Which of the following arguments has the same structure as the argument above? A. To be sure of catching the train from Paddington, you should have allowed enough time to get to the station and to find the platform. You may get to the station in time, but Paddington is very large, so you won't be able to find the platform in time. Therefore, you're going to miss the train. B. To pass your exam, you need to be hardworking and intelligent. You have done very little revision and your score in intelligence test is very low. Therefore, you're going to fail your exam. C. Your car is below the high tide line and is stuck in the sand. The tide will be at its maximum height in 30 minutes, and the tow truck is not due for 45 minutes. So you're not going to be able to save your car from the sea. D. To get to Nottingham, you will either have to go up the motorway or go on train. The motorway is blocked due to an accident and will not be open for several hours. Therefore, you will have to take the train. E. For breakfast, you have to either have toast or cereal. Unfortunately, there's no bread, and I have just eaten the last of the cereal, so you will not be able to have any breakfast. So, if you cannot identify already, these options are very long-winded and have such unnecessary information. So, immediately strip away the context. Forget the actual topics. You can see the topics are so random. There's breakfast, there's motorways, there's trains. So, ignore that and instead let's map the logic. So if we actually analyze the example argument, we can go and break it down. So with sentence one, if you intend to have a fire, you'll need dry kindling wood and a firelighter. So the structure of that is essentially saying to achieve a goal, you need to have a dry kindling wood and a firelighter. So requirement 1 and requirement 2. So with sentence 2, it says, unfortunately, the kindling wood has been left down the rain. So essentially, you don't have it. So the structure of that says that requirement A is missing. So with sentence 3, so even though you have a firelighter, you will not be able to light the fire. The structure says that even though you have a requirement 2, you cannot achieve the goal because one necessary part is missing. So basically, to get to G, you need 1 and 2. You have 2, but you lack 1, therefore you cannot get to G. It sounds weird and it sounds complicated, but I promise you, when you have a scrap piece of paper, it is much more easier to note these. But yeah, so if you look into that, we can go and evaluate these against our options. So if you cannot tell already, the correct argument is A, the train argument. So if we go through it, it says, to be sure of catching the train, blah, 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 you should have allowed enough time to get to the station and to find a platform. So essentially, we change G into catching the train. So the goal requires time to get to the station and time to go to the platform. So 2 requirements. With the second sentence, it says, you may get to the station in time. So essentially, have requirement 1, but you won't be able to find a platform in time. So you do not have requirement 2. Again, it matches because one requirement is met, but the other one has not been met. So therefore, you're going to miss the train. So therefore, the goal, G, cannot be achieved. So it matches the structure completely. Even though it has so much additional information and fluff, it replicates the structure of joining 2 join conditions and having only one of them. So therefore, the main objective is as a result. So if we look into why the other options are incorrect, for B, the exam argument, the logic is to pass your exam, you need to be hardworking and intelligent. So we can see that there's a goal and there's 2 requirements. So you have done little revision, so lack of 1, and your intelligence score is low, so lack of 2. Therefore you fail. So the reason why this one is wrong is because in this option, both requirements fail, whereas in the original one requirement was met. So you did have the firelighter, so 1 requirement was met. So that's why that one does not work. So with the car and tide argument, the argument deals with the clash of time constraints leading to its inevitable bad income. So it's wrong because it lacks, to achieve X, you need both Y and Z essentially. So it's the structural setup essentially, and it's quite situational narrative rather than unconditional. So you should have been able to rule that out quite quickly. It had a lot of fluff in this one as well. So yeah. With D, the Nottingham journey, so the logic behind it is to get to Nottingham, you must use either the motorway or the train. So notice the difference. You can do one or the other, whereas in the original argument, it says you need both. So yeah, that's why it's wrong, because it has either slash or. So if one path is blocked, you can take the alternative. Whereas in the fire argument, you need both things to actually work out, and there's no choice. And with E, so the logic behind is for breakfast, you like either toast or cereal. There's no bread and no cereal, so you cannot have breakfast. So again, like option D, to get into Nottingham, whatever, it relies on an either or preference, and it fails because both alternative choices are unavailable, and it does not match the joint necessity which is said in fire argument. So these questions are honestly quite fun once you get the hang of it, but they'll take more time to read because you really need to digest the arguments, because some of these actually did mimic it quite well, but not exactly, and it's really the small intricacies which matter. So I will make sure that you look for logical connectors they're quite big and they're quite easy to rule out as well, so make sure you look for that and count as well how many conditions are given and are satisfied. But yeah, that's all I have to say for that question time, and for the next video we're going to go through applying principles. So I'll see you there. Bye bye.